All right, welcome everyone. Today I have Chief Kent from Alexandra PD in Minnesota. He has 28 years experience in law enforcement. I'm really excited to have him on Words of the Wise. Thank you so much for being here, Chief Kent.
Hey, Paige, thanks for the invitation, and I'm equally as excited. Can't wait to get started.
I know, and we talked a little offline, and I know that wellness is a passion of yours, so I'm really excited to talk about the things that you're doing and your organization. I think it's really funny because whenever we talk offline, I think that everyone always asks you guys, like, what's the craziest thing that you've ever been through, or like the craziest cop story, in 28 years. I wanted to ask you, what is the best advice that you've received in your career?
The best advice that I received in my career would probably be to go do the things that you don't want to do. We come into this career where it's really easy to find the things, whether it's a drug task force or I want a dog or I want to be on the SWAT team. Um, I have a friend and a mentor by the name of Dan Bauman. He's retired BCA agent now. And early in my career, he really pushed me into a mindset of go try the things that don't click those boxes. All of those other things are going to line for you in your career. But if you try to avoid the things that maybe not sink your bobber, try it anyway. It's going to round out your career. It's going to give you a perspective of something different, and you don't have to continue down that road. But at least you tried it, and it'll give you a different perspective. So I think that's probably the best advice I ever got was try something you didn't think you wanted to do.
I really like that. And I wrote down before you said it, like well-rounded and giving you that different perspective. It sounds like really, really good advice. How important do you think it is to have a mentor in this career?
I think it's huge. Sometimes you accidentally find them. Sometimes it's intentional. Like, I want you to be my mentor. Uh, Dan happened to be my person. I did an internship when I was in college, and I ended up being connected with Dan just by the agent that I would follow along with. And it happened by accident. We've become friends for nearly 30 years from that. But it's just aligning yourself with somebody that you can feel like they're going to guide you through your career, not tell you what you want to hear, what you need to hear. And that's the important piece.
Yeah, I like that. I think sometimes you can tell like who the best people in your circle are by the people who tell it like it is and give
Hmm.
you that real feedback and not just like you said, what you want to hear, because that's not always useful. Sometimes you need a little bit of like a shake to realize some things.
Yeah, we all need high fives and hugs, but we also have to be told the truth every once in a while to keep us on track. So that's what I look for in mentors. That's what I try to model as a police leader.
And do you think that that did impact the way that you lead and the way that you are around people is you wanting to now be a mentor for others because you had such a positive influence in your life?
Yeah, I think those roles, whether it's consciously or I've never consciously went into it going, I'd like to be your mentor. But you get through the skill set phase of your career, knowing that you can only become so good or so proficient at, resting, shooting, driving, all of those skill set, tactical things. And the experiences that you have over the course of your career, you're going to have to eventually start changing those into how do I lead people differently and how do I start putting people in positions to be successful in their journey. So I don't. It wasn't an intentional. I want to be a mentor. I think that's a responsibility of leadership.
Yeah. And can you give some background on your career for anyone who doesn't know you? How did you get started in this profession and what did those 28 years look like for you?
Yeah, 28 years is a long time to captivate in a couple of minutes, but I got a 4-year degree, and then in Minnesota, you can the path is 2-year or 4-year degree with some skills training. You have to go to school all on your own, and then agencies hire you. A little bit different than academy model states. So I went through my college career, went through skills training, and that many years ago, it was tough to get into the profession. in our area. So you had 100 to 200 people applying for one position, regardless of the size of the agency. So I took the first job that I was offered, and that was in a small town in North Dakota. I was there, served in a investigator role, patrol officer, was in the school, walking through those doors of what's next, what can I try? So I was over there for 4 years, and my wife and I were just starting our family and moved to this area in Alexandria. It's rural Minnesota. It's a vacation destination, 2 hours from Minneapolis, St. Paul area, 2 hours from the Fargo Moorhead, situated on I-94. So there's a lot of commuting traffic in and out. And the opportunities and timing just happened to work out to my benefit. I was on patrol for a couple of years, worked investigations for a handful, and then got the opportunity to be captain. And that's a second command spot within our organization. We're the staff of 25 officers right now, and 5 or 6 non-licensed staff. And I was in that captain's role for a good 15 years, and I'm in year 5 right now of being a chief. So administratively, I've been in this position for a lot longer than I have in any other position.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I know when we talked offline, you mentioned that, several years ago, your agency was in a place where you identified the need for wellness. Can you give a little background on what was going on and what made you reach that point of like, we need to focus on wellness? And what are some of those steps that you did to begin the infancy stages of building that wellness program?
Yeah, back when I was a captain, I think in that 6, 7, 8 years ago, like we had talked about, we had some officers that were dealing and experiencing some hard situations, whether it was overuse on chemicals, alcohol, mental health issues, a lot of traumatic issues that people were seeing and experiencing and not necessarily knowing how to unpack those or deal with them. The trauma-related stuff, the vicarious trauma that the families were seeing, and there was just kind of an edge. We were also experiencing an officer that had received an on-duty injury while training, so common in the police world, and also somebody that was experiencing some traumatic issues and looking at leaving the profession in the industry. And I had other members around us going, we need to do something. We're not sure what. So when I transitioned to the chief's position, like we had talked about, that first day, the first meeting and first day, we broke up into small groups. And I looked at it as, from that leadership capacity, this is not my job, my agency. It's my job to facilitate this. And I really wanted to get a handle and grasp on what is it that we as an agency, not the chief, what does we as an agency want to do? And not knowing what that experiment was going to look like, we broke up into small groups and we started to put post-it notes up on the board, the big 3x5. And they were tasked with, what are the 10 things in your agency, our agency, that we want to accomplish in the next 2 years? What are the big aha moments? What do we really want? And universally, the thing that came out on top is we want some sort of wellness. The words and what they wanted were really aligning with, we need some component of mental health wellness. Not knowing what that looked like, that's where we were driving. I speak with a lot of police leaders, executives, sheriffs, chiefs, and one of the commonalities is I hear a lot of buy-in. I need buy-in from my staff in order to move a program forward. Buy-in is only half of it. The ownership is the other half. And I looked at that project as saying, if we're going to have a buy-in, we need an ownership. We need a transition in who's going to run this. And we don't look at programs. Programs are usually grant funded, financially funded, and they run their course and they're not meant to be sustainable. So we didn't want to put a name on a program for a mental health. We wanted to change culture, stigma, and we wanted it to be long-term sustainable. I didn't want this to be the chief's pet project and have it die on the vine if I were to leave. We wanted this to be an embedded part of our culture for long-term sustainability. That's where that ownership and buy-in happened. So we asked a sergeant if they wanted to participate. We had a sergeant raise their hand and go, I'll run the charge on this. And then we had 4 or 5. We actually had to do interviews and kind of vet out the staff that wanted to be a part of it. We had more people that wanted to be a part of it than we could really take on. And we looked at a team of 5 officers with that sergeant. And then they were tasked with, what do you want out of what does this look like? A peer support? We want a counselor, a therapist, a psychologist. What is it we want? And there's a local therapist that specializes in trauma that agreed to come in and help guide the conversation. We're cops. We don't know what this looks like. We know that we want to help, but we don't know the terms, the language, what is it that we were really looking for. So this person really helped guide this group into what it is that we want to do. And I was alongside the journey, along with the captain, but we weren't running it. They were legitimately running it, wanting it, asking permission. What is it going to cost? And when we went to the budget committee and city council to, advocate for funds, we really looked at it from a standpoint of, if we lost somebody on a duty disability for mental health, it's going to be about $15,000 a year that we're going to have to pay as a city for their health insurance. So before that happens, let's set aside $15,000 for mental health therapy of some sort, to bring in a clinical consultant, the trauma therapist, whatever that looks like. We want to pay upfront for that duty disability and put that towards our current staff, which isn't too much of an ask when you sell it that way. We've added and increased from there, but we'd never had a program or anything like this, so we didn't even know where to start with funds. Is it 5 hours a month with a therapist? Is it 50 hours a month with a therapist? We had no idea. And again, we're only a staff of 25. So we didn't figure our entire department was going to utilize whatever that looked like, everybody using 1 hour a month. So we dialed that back to about half, and city council said, sure, run with this, $15,000. We worked through a request for proposal. We had a lot of people in our community that wanted to be a part of it, a lot of therapists, psychologists. Our team did the interviews and the vetting of that. I wasn't a part of it. My job was to get the finances. So that whole peer support team, which that's what we call it now, is a peer support team, they did the interviews. They asked the hard questions of, what does it look like if we're in a session for note taking? Are these going to be in a file drawer by name and badge number and rank, and you're going to pull these out in case I have an officer involved shooting? All of those cop questions of, how is this going to be used against me? All of that cynical stuff. They vetted through that in the interview. And in the end, we ended up hiring the same trauma therapist that came in to help us with that. She gave a really nice perspective, and they really liked her approach on therapy and note taking. And so we have her as a clinical consultant for a lot of different reasons. And, in the back of my mind, we talk about stigma. I thought it was going to run probably about 3 years before people really felt comfortable. And we got to 6 months and people were trading appointments with her. And so we do quarterly check-ins, but there's nothing mandated. There's nothing required. She's available. She'll check in and say, I haven't seen you for a while. Do you want to set up an appointment? But we have 100% participation with zero mandates. And I listen to a lot of chiefs and sheriffs that do the checkup from the neck up, and they do a mandatory check-in once a year. I think that's a great way to start. To force some of that stigma. But what I see with that long term is that's going to go with that chief or that sheriff as long as they're there. We know that police officers like to control their situation, and the universal rub with all public safety, whether it's police, fire, EMS, nobody likes to schedule. Cops go to training, and that's one thing universally they talk about is the schedule that they have zero or very little control over. So we wanted to give the control back to the officers to make sure that they can come and go. Now, I'm afraid with the mandatory once a year annual checkup that so many agencies are doing, I think that's a great way to get them in. However, I think it's going to set up a long-term failure because that rests with the chief or sheriff, and they're mandating that. So a new person, new leadership comes in, they may not mandate it, and you might not have that set up. It's more from that administrative standpoint of who's running and controlling it. I know that if I leave tomorrow, this program is going to be sustainable forever. The money's there. It's not going to get cut, and you'll have a small mutiny on your hands at our department if you wanted to get rid of this program.
I love that. You'll have a small mutiny on your hands if you try to cut it because everyone's gonna be up in arms about it. I love that. And I wanted to just recap a few things because I find this to be really fascinating. I mean, I talk to agencies all across the country and everyone is struggling with what you said is like, how do we get buy-in? How do we get usage? Like, how can we justify spending money on programs if we don't know it's going to be successful? And when we talked offline, I mean, I was really impressed by this of like, okay, 8 years ago, you identified that there was some issues going on within the organization that needed to be addressed. Then you took the entire department and said, hey, what do you guys need? Like, what do you want to see? What changes you need? And that was just across the board. It wasn't asking about wellness. It was like, hey, like, what can we do as an organization to make some positive changes that are going to help you guys? Then they came up with it themselves of like, we need wellness. Like, we want it. We're craving it. This is something that's really important to us. Then you gave them ownership of that and said, okay, what does that look like for you? What do you want? What do you need? And then putting together a group of people that, like you said, took ownership of it. And I love that you said buy-in is half of it, ownership is the other half, because you already knew that you had buy-in by asking them, what do you want? And them saying,
Mm-hmm.
want wellness. But then you took it a step further of like, okay, what does that look like? Let's have you guys create that. And I'm going to be in full support of that for you guys. So whatever we need to do from a financial perspective, I'm going to be there supporting you guys and helping you, make this a reality. And then I love that they vetted everyone and interviewed everyone to pick the person that they trusted the most and that they wanted to be in that position. Because one of the things I hear all the time is, and and I think it has its place for sure. You have the EAP system, and I think that it has its place. But what I hear is that there's a lot of distrust, and people maybe aren't as trusting to go to people who they might not know, or they're not getting the same therapist every time. So it's hard to build that trust. And so vetting someone themselves and saying, hey, we really like this person. This is the person that we want to talk to. And now, without any mandates at all, you have 100% participation. I think that that's incredible. And to your point, you're paying for it on the front end, so you don't pay for it on the back end. Because if we're not
Exactly.
proactive in paying for things on the front end, it's just a matter of time before you're going to have to pay for it on the back end. So taking more of that proactive approach of like, okay, this funding is in place, it's there. We have 100% of people using it, which means it's never going to go away because we took the steps to make sure that everyone is on board. And then one of the things you told me offline that you didn't mention yet that I thought was really, really cool is you said people are going in the front door. It's not like a secretive thing. People are
Mm-mm.
like, they're walking in and they're like proud to say, hey, like I have a meeting scheduled with this therapist. And people are actually talking about that. Can you maybe explain a little bit about that culture? Because I still think even though agencies have these resources, there's still a little bit, like you said, of that like stigma or that secrecy of like, yes, we have it and people are using it, but people don't want to talk about it. And with you guys, like everyone's talking about it and they're walking in the front door. It's not like pull up to the back door. I think you said pull up in the back door in like a unmarked car and jump out and, run in. So can you explain a little bit of that? Because I think it's really cool.
Um, it goes to the peer support team. Um, them really buying and owning it and looking out for one another. We've got story after story. I haven't went back into staff to get permission to use some of those stories. However, they just know that they can, if they see something off, and we can tell. We work with our partners on such a regular basis. We know if there's something off, whether there's words or said. We show up with attitude. It weighs on us. We're very emotional, not only human beings, but police officers are very emotional. Sometimes we can be very stoic. However, we know when something's off, either in our family life, our personal life, or we had a bad call, and we recognize bad calls really easy. So one of that culture of being able to say, hey, can I switch with you? I got something coming up. I know that you got a 2 o'clock appointment. Paige, can I switch with you? Can you take my 3? And I have something else that I need to do at 2 o'clock. That's just common. But I think that goes to building that culture, looking out for your partners. And it's really common on a daily basis for somebody to have a bad day or check in on people and reach out to the peer support or our clinical consultant, Erica, and just say, hey, I think Paige is having a bad day or she just was on a bad call. Can you do a check in on her? And it's either a text message or a call that a peer support team member or our clinical consultant, Erica, will give you a call or a text and go, hey, somebody was concerned about you, said you had a hard day. You okay? You want to come in and talk? And just that being acknowledged goes 100 miles. Now, since we last talked, I try to do videos instead of sending out an email with updates, very impersonal. I try to do a Teams meet and send out a video. I'm not as good as I'd like to be, but every 2, 3 weeks, sometimes it rolls into a month of just some things that are happening administratively in my office. The last 3 weeks have just been a grind. For whatever reason, it's just been all day, every day, something. So I put out a video last Friday, and then I left for the day. Had some things personally that I had to run on. I get a call from a patrol officer. I was on the phone. I called him back. I said, hey, what's up? He goes, I was just calling to check on you. I could tell in the video something was really weighing on you. For a patrol officer to call the chief and go, hey, I'm worried about you. That is a culture that just is phenomenal, in my opinion. And they're owning it from the peer support area to check on their coworkers. And I think that's why it's sustainable. That's why they can trade with their therapist. And it's just common language to make sure everybody's doing okay. I
Yeah.
start to get emotional about that story on Fridays.
I love that. And I think it's, there's so many conversations about like, you guys are family, but that story shows that you guys are a family.
Mm-hmm.
That's the culture that you've created within your organization, that you guys are a team. I'm going to get emotional too. You guys are a team, you're a family, and you're looking out for each other. And, I think a lot of times we also forget that like you need support too, in leadership, and to have a team that looks out for you and trusts you and cares about you to be able to call you and look out for you, I think that is incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
So that's why we have such an amazing. We don't hire amazing police officers. We hire amazing human beings. We
Mm,
can teach you how to be a police officer.
I love that. I really do. And I wanted to ask you because I know like you guys have been putting in the work for this. How does the culture now or the performance or the attitude now compare to what it was 8 years ago when you said that you guys identified this? Is it night and day? Have you seen some like changes within the organization as far as how they interact with the community or performance or family life? What are some of the things that you've seen, change for the better? And how can other agencies create that for themselves? Because I think that it sounds like a huge feat. You make it sound easy, but it sounds like there was a lot of work that went into that.
This could be a really global conversation, and one of the hot topics, not only in Minnesota but surrounding policing, is use of force. Um, and I'll talk about this anecdotally because I don't know how to scientifically research it. I'm a cop by trade, so analytics and science and like that doesn't all work in my brain. But I do know that what I do believe is we're taking care of people differently, and it goes to the mental health aspect. So when we're strong emotionally and we're being taken care of and we support one another, I think that reflects on the community. I
Yeah.
think we see ourselves in people in the community, and we can understand what's going on, and that empathy level is exhibited differently. So taser use of force, physical, things like that. We've seen a steady decrease in the last 10 years, and especially in the last five. We're doing analytics and statistics. I don't want to start getting into comparison with other departments, but just for perspective, we're doing about 17,000 calls a year for service. Out of those, we had one taser deployment the last 3 years, which is astounding for the number of cases that we're doing in our small department. But even more impressively, 0.18% out of those 17,000 calls result in something other than handcuffing as far as use of force. So we're tracking those statistics. So that goes to de-escalation techniques, scenario-based training. I believe it has a lot to do with the amount of time and energy we spend on working on ourselves to not just deregulate in a anxiety, emotionally filled situation that we're dealing with within the public. So we still have hard cases. We have hard customers that we have to deal with, but we're dealing with them differently than we did 5, 8, 10, 15 years ago. And I think it really comes down to how we're caring for ourselves emotionally.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that that's a testament to the work that you've done, and the fact that you're able to track that and say, if we have a good culture, if we take care of our people, if they're happier and healthier, then their work lives are happier and healthier, their home lives are happier and healthier, and the way that they respond to calls and they interact with the community is healthier. And I also loved that you have this foresight to say, hey, like, I don't want this to end when I leave. I want this to be something that carries on for the future. I want this to be sustainable and I want my people to be cared for long term. And I think that you're exactly right. And kind of circling back to what you said before, a lot of times there are grants available. And I think it's a really good way to kind of jumpstart things, but it's not sustainable because those grants are not guaranteed and those might fall through. So, how can you create longevity in your programming and longevity in that culture so that when you leave, you know that everyone is still taken care of? And I think that that's also a part of like leadership and legacy. How do you make sure that it's not just, the time that you're there? And I think that that's really an important thing to consider, that not only is it helping your officers now, but it's going to help people for generations to come.
I've had a couple things as chief that I wanted to roll out. I thought or I saw the need and I wanted to make sure that we did a couple of those things. And they only lasted as long as the funds were there or as long as my passion was driven. And we're no longer doing those. And I think it's fine. Not fine. I think it's great to experiment and try different things within the organization. But I know that if it's mine, it's not sustainable unless I'm on top of it and I'm on point and I'm driving it. People will follow, but as soon as I let off the gas, those things disappear. And that's not what we want for our community or for our agency. We want things that are sustainable long term.
Yeah, 100%. I wanted to talk about something that we talked about offline a little bit. And I know that right now there's a challenge with, I think agencies across the board, there's a hiring challenge. But you also mentioned a different perspective to this. And you talked about retirees. Can you give a little bit of explanation as to what you're seeing on that end of things?
I think we're in a crisis that we haven't talked about. We're walking into it here in Minnesota. I can't speak for the rest of the country, but we've got a lot of people between that 50 and 60 year old range, 20 to 30 years of experience. That experience is not replaceable. And we've seen a large influx of younger people coming into organizations, into policing and law enforcement, public safety. And I don't think we've done a great job of training people and replacing ourselves. And I feel like we're going to have a really young generation of inexperienced police leaders. They're going to unfortunately have to figure it out the hard way without any the guiding and the mentoring and what that looks like. The most part, generically, we start training young sergeants and lieutenants once they've been promoted. That's when we start giving them the scope of leadership training. We're trying to do that a little bit different here and start those senior level patrol officers. And tomorrow we have another meeting with a consultant on what that looks like. So we're in the infancy stages of trying to transform what that looks like to develop those police leaders. We're really, really good in this industry at building skill sets. We'll send you this training to be a use of force, a firearms instructor, defensive tactics, be really good at drug examiner, field sobriety, all of those skill sets. We really, really good at that. What we're not good at is transforming that into leadership styles and getting people trained up before they take that leadership. Not only should we have the responsibility to do that for our community, we should be doing that for our organization. So the biggest failure I feel is here's your first rank. You're going to be a sergeant tomorrow. And that's when we start training you. I think that's a leadership failure. And I'm not pointing the fingers at my peers across the country. I just don't think we know how to do it until we get promoted. So we're trying something different. We're experimenting with that. We're bringing in a consultant to see what it looks like to train those senior patrol officers. So when they hit the ground running on that first day, they put sergeant stripes on. They have a good understanding of what leadership looks like and sounds like. Now they still have to do the hard work. They got to bump through life in those positions, but it's not like, okay, I'm a sergeant and it feels cool. They have some idea what those expectations are. And we're doing it a little bit, but we're not doing it well. And I don't think it's just policing. I think it's in any industry. I'm not satisfied with that. So I want something different for our people. And I think our people are hungry for this opportunity as well.
And so you're taking more of that proactive approach, not just in wellness, but also in leadership training. So you're really trying to figure out what does this look like? Because we know that I think you said a figure of like 25% are scheduled to retire soon. And
Yep.
so how do you prepare that younger generation for those leadership roles if maybe they don't have the amount of time in this profession that they used to? And what does that look like? And how can we make sure that as the 25% retire, the younger generation is ready to take over?
Mm-hmm. Nothing sucks worse than having the rug ripped out from under you and go, okay, tag, you're it. And being left with, I have no idea what the expectations are. I have no idea what to do next. And I think that's our responsibility to train that next generation um, to what our communities want and expect.
Why do you think that this is something that's maybe not really talked about or um, other agencies maybe aren't preparing for? Is it maybe that proactivity is a little bit harder, or why do you think that this isn't like a well known? Because this is the first time I've had the conversation like this on the podcast about like how can we, change our leadership training to prepare for this?
Unfortunately, policing industry is, I might get sacrificed by my peers, but it's largely unchanged for 40, 50 years. And we've adapted with technology. Instead of batons and mace, we're carrying tasers and body cameras. So we've had some technology advances, of which have been societal driven, not because police professionals are wanting body cameras and tasers. Those are because societal things have changed and societal expectations have changed. But as an industry, we're still training largely the same within our academies, our universities, our college systems. And the same goes with rank. It's kind of that hazing. You won't get trained until you get into a position of rank. Now you're into the club and now we'll start training you instead of preparing you for what it looks like. Interviews in our area, I can only speak to that, but I hope you are going to be proficient. I hope you have some of the skills to be a sergeant, but we don't know what that looks like until you get that first rank, until we start testing some of those things by the interview questions. We want to be able to prepare those people so they know and we know if they're going to be a good fit. And it's not an experiment with their life or their profession. Once they get into those ranks, we can hit the ground running.
Yeah, I really appreciate your proactive approach to training and to wellness. Proactive measures are always harder. I think it's
Mhm.
easier to be reactive, and then you learn on both ends, what works and what doesn't. But especially in the context of wellness, it's like a lot of times you don't address a problem until there's a problem, right? It's like you're injured and you're like, oh no, now I got to focus on, my physical health, or, you had some sort of screening and they tell you that you have heart issues or, whatever. And then you're like, oh, now I have to deal with it. And so I do think that in human nature, we're more reactive than we are proactive. And I think that in the conversations that I'm having, there's more of a focus on how can we be proactive. And I think that that's really important. And it goes back to what we said before, like how can you get in front of things so that you don't end up in this position where 25% of your department leaves and no one's prepared to step in, or you have someone who takes their life, or you have someone who leaves the profession entirely because they're burnt out or they're having some sort of mental, challenge because of the job. How can we get in front of that so you do the the effort on the front end so you don't have to pay for it on the back end? And I always say this because I think that there's three steps to proactiveness. One is awareness, right? Like if you don't understand that there's an issue or a challenge, then how are you going to address it? And I think we've
Mhm.
talked about this on both ends, on wellness and on training and preparing for future leadership. But having that awareness of, okay, this is a challenge, then educating yourself, okay, what can we do? What are the things that we can do to get in front of it? And then the third one, which is I think the hardest and the one that's missed a lot, because I think that there is more awareness, especially in the wellness space. There is more education, there's conversations, there's conferences and all the things. But the third one is action. So how can then you take your awareness and your education and put that into motion and put that into action? And I really appreciate the things that you've done so far. Even if some things are in infancy stages, it sounds to me like you are now in that action phase.
There's a story that I like to use about missing opportunities, recognizing an opportunity and not missing it, or at least trying it. So this goes back years ago to trying out for seventh grade basketball. My dad told a story about he was asked to go and play baseball for a college along with getting his education, and he sat on the baseline waiting for a coach to put him into a position. And 3 days of tryouts came, and my dad got cut. And he went up to the coach and said, "Why did you get cut? Or why did I get cut? Why am I not on the roster?" He goes, "You didn't go stick your nose out there. You didn't go take a position. You just sat here and waited." And the story back to me is, don't wait to be told what to do. Don't ask. Don't wait to ask to go in and participate. If you see an opportunity, take it.
Mhm.
You can choose after you take it or after you walk through that door to decide whether you want to continue with that or not. But don't miss an opportunity, whether it's a promotion, advancement, a training. Now, sometimes that becomes a burden, but that goes to the action piece that you just talked about, Paige. Is when you recognize an opportunity, go through the door, take action, engage. So many police tactical words in that. But really, there's so many opportunities with leadership, with wellness. Don't miss an opportunity to do better for your people.
I love that. And what was going through my mind is you rarely regret taking a chance, but you almost always regret not. And I think it also goes to simple things. It's like, how can someone take action for their own wellness? And it's like getting up and going to the gym, or getting up and like doing the thing. And it's kind of what you said before, like maybe the thing that you don't want to do, but like, that maybe you should. And so it's like for me, if I don't go to the gym, as a very simple example, I always regret that. I'm like, dang
Mm-hmm.
it, I should have done that. And if I go, maybe I'm like kicking and screaming all the way there, and I'm like, I don't really want to do this. I'm not motivated to do this. But then when I go, I'm like, okay, I'm really glad I did that. And I think that at least for me, I always have kind of kicked myself for not taking action or not taking those opportunities to try something new. But I very rarely regret at least trying. So I appreciate that story. I think that's a really cool story.
we try so hard to be perfectionist and not screw up. We don't want to get disciplined. We don't want to be coached differently. We try to do it so well the first time, but we don't talk about failing forward. We don't talk about making mistakes and encouraging our coworkers to, try something and step out of bounds, to do something radical, come up with a radical idea. Um, that's what we try to encourage our staff to do, is take some big ideas, and how can we implement them? We want people to go to conferences. We want them to go to trainings out of our state. We want to see how we can scale things differently. I think those perspectives are really fun, fascinating, and really sometimes pushes doors open for opportunities. So.
I love that failing forward. I would argue, and I'm sure that there are other people who agree with this, but I have learned more from my failures than I have from my successes. And it is scary and it's hard to take those chances, and no one wants to feel like they quote unquote failed at something or they weren't successful with something. But those have been my biggest growth opportunities. And the one thing that you said that I think is the important second to that is that you've created a culture within your organization where people are supportive of you taking those chances. And whether you fail or you succeed isn't going to change the support that you're receiving within the organization. And I think that helps people, it encourages people to take those risks if they know that their peers are not judging them, they're actually like cheering them on.
Oh yeah. Um, Come up with crazy ideas, push, the boundaries. This is a very peer-driven industry, and we don't like to step out of bounds or do anything against the status quo or that 40 or 50-year tradition or history. And to step out of that, your partners and peers really look cross-eyed at you and go, "What's wrong with you?" I try to encourage that off-the-wall thinking. Not crazy, stupid stuff, but that pushes the boundaries of what we know to be true, I guess.
And you guys are, and I love this because you said this when we were talking offline, but you guys are in this really amazing position where you have done the legwork of creating a culture that is supportive, that supports wellness, that talks about wellness, and you guys are trading therapy sessions with each other. You're thinking forward about, leadership training and how you can support internal development. And now you're in this position of like, what's next? What capacity do we have? What else can we do? What can we add? Can you maybe give some feedback as to maybe some things you guys are looking at doing, or some other things that you've implemented that have been successful, for anyone who may be listening who's trying to follow in your lead? What's next? What are some things that you want to add in the future that you guys are talking about?
One thing that we didn't talk about offline is the physical component. Wellness is more than just a mental health. There's a physical, spiritual,
Yeah.
depending on who you talk to or research. You could have as many as 5 or 6 legs or components to a wellness program. The one that we're still in the infancy, it's not taking off quite as fast, because there's actual work that has to be done physically, is our physical wellness program. So we've got a vetting that has to happen and a pre-service, pre-employment. You have to go through a wellness exam. We've hired a third-party consultant to go through a battery of tests. There's a validation. Minnesota's been validated through a different company, testing, surveying, with a physical component. It's not mandated. There's a model. We adopted that model. We do that for pre-service. So when we give you a conditional job offer, we send you over to the clinic and have you go through these battery of tests to make sure you can do those minimums. But we also are experimenting and trying to do that in service. So once a year, we're bringing that consulting group is through our local hospital physical therapy department. They come in and it's a volunteer. We don't have 100% participation in that. I can't brag as much, but we're still in the infancy of it. But we go through those battery of tests and we start creating a baseline. And the reason for that is if you create that baseline and you have to go out on a disability, you go out on paternity, maternity leave, and need to come back after some time, we're going to send you back over to that third party. But that's what we're going to try to get you back to, not a baseline of unknowns, not a baseline of other officers in the state. We want you to have your individual baseline.
Mm.
Now, with the injuries I've had to my shoulders, I'm not 100% in either shoulder, and both of them are different strengths. So if I injured one and had to rehabilitate, go on leave, and come back, and the classic model is we need to make sure that we're testing you at 100% for both shoulders. Well, that's not how I left. So
Right.
we want a baseline of muscular skeletal, physical agility, all of that year to year. So if somebody has to leave for whatever reason and come back, we know what we need to bring you back to, not what you were pre-service, 20 years ago, not to what a general practicing doctor thinks is your 100%. We want to make sure that that's individualized. So we're working on that component of not only the mental health, the physical piece of that. So not only the return to work, but then what does it look like to be healthy day to day?
Yeah. And you're,
Uh, so we're trying that, but I'm positive that we can make some positive gains. The hard part is there's a lot of ownership, that buy-in and ownership. The buy-in is there, but the owning and actually doing the physical work to improve, that's where it becomes a little bit harder. There's a lot more off-duty time. There's a lot more work. It hurts to work out. Your muscles are sore. You know that from hitting the gym. There's just a lot more work to do with that component. So it's a little bit slower to take off.
yeah, and I think there's a level of like, and I've experienced this too in my life where I think you do start to compare what you used to be able to do to what you can do now. And it can be a little discouraging if you're not at a level where you used to be, especially like post-injury. That's tough, because I've been injured and didn't come back fully
Hmm.
still, after like breaking a bone or whatever. And I think that to your point, like physical fitness and mental health really do intersect with each other. And I know you mentioned some other things too, and it is more of a holistic approach. And physical fitness, I think, looks different for everybody, and mental health looks different for everybody. But I think your approach of it's not a one size fits all, and how can we address the individual and make sure that they're feeling their best and performing at their best now, not what they were when they were 20 years old, because that's going to look so different. Like I I wish sometimes that I could feel like I did when I was 20 years old, and definitely don't now, for various reasons. But I think that if you're always comparing yourself, then you're never feeling good with where you are now. So I really appreciate that approach of trying to be more proactive, really trying to, approach the individual, having more of a personalized approach and not a one size fits all. And
Hmm.
recognizing that there's different pillars of wellness. And I know you said physical, mental, spiritual, and I imagine that there's other areas that you guys are focusing on too, within your programming. But I think that if you can take more, and I know this word is so taboo, and I'm hoping one day it won't be, but more of that holistic approach.
And I don't understand why it's taboo or even why people, but it's the whole component of being well. You can't just focus on mental health without physical and spiritual. You can't do just spiritual. You need that holistic approach in order to be healthy, period. And
Yeah.
that's not as a police officer, that's as a human being.
100%. And it's all intertwined. Like that's the thing that's so interesting. It's like if you don't feel good physically, you're not going to feel good mentally. If you don't eat well, you're not going to feel good physically or mentally. If you don't have, a positive mental health or mental attitude, you're not going to have that wellness within your home because you're going to be taking that home with you. So everything is intertwined. And so I think that you have to look at all aspects of wellness and how can you create a sustainable, consistent, I would say like program or routine that works for you as an individual. And to me, I think that consistency is more important than anything else. It's like, how can you just create reasonable, actionable things that you can do consistently to create that habit? Because I think a lot of times wellness can be overwhelming, and then everyone thinks that they have to do everything at once. And it's like, and especially in this profession, I think, like to your point, everyone wants to be perfect and like go all in, and then it's not sustainable with your scheduling or whatever, and you kind of burn out and fizzle out. But if we can have like small, actionable things that you can do consistently, you're going to be so much better off than if you just started in a full sprint, you know?
Hmm.
Well, I have one final question for you, and I'll let you take the floor after if there's anything that we missed. But what words of wisdom would you give to someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known, or something that's helped you along the way.
Um, it's going to reflect a lot on what we talked about earlier is take those risks, walk through the door, try those opportunities. If your mind focus is, I want to do this, this, and this in my career, ask the question of what don't you want to do and try those first. Those other things are going to come along really naturally. And you might end up doing this, this, and this, the things that really, really drive you. But the opportunity to see something different, which goes along with if you get an opportunity to travel inside our country, outside of our country. I've had the opportunity to go to some different countries and look at policing different and how we see policing in our own community versus other parts of our country versus other countries. It really changes the perspective on how we police, how we show up, how we look different to different people. But it's, we talk about health and wellness and that holistic approach. Policing isn't policing from community to community. So really walk through doors, challenge yourself, and pause and reflect on what does it look like to other people? Not so much what you look like or what you see through your eyes, but what other people see in police, how they recognize you, how you show up. Um, but in order to do that, you have to walk through doors. You have to seek out opportunities, and it may be uncomfortable, but it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to fail. It's okay to try those things.
Thank you. Great words of advice. I really appreciate it. I want to give you the floor if there's anything else that we missed. Otherwise, that's all I have for you.
I really don't. We covered a lot in an hour. So I really appreciate the opportunity, Paige. I really appreciate the conversation. I love talking to people outside of Minnesota and love sharing our story. I couldn't be prouder of our staff, our people. I couldn't be in the position that I am if it wasn't for our the members of our department, the men and women that serve our community. They're just absolutely amazing human beings that do great police work.
Well, I appreciate your time so much, and I really do appreciate the efforts and your passion for wellness. It's been so apparent and clear since the first time that we talked, and it's an honor for me, and I'm gonna get emotional now, but it's an honor for me to be able to spend some time with you and talk about the things that you guys have done, and you've done a great job. So I appreciate your time so much, and I hope that, we can stay in touch in the future. So thank you.
Absolutely appreciate it. Thanks, Paige.
Of course.